What happens when sex becomes a transaction instead of a gift? Why does sexual intimacy sometimes leave us feeling more alone than connected? Can consensual sexual activity still leave us feeling used? And if so, how can distinguishing between love and lust help us find the kind of connection that truly satisfies the heart and not just the body? All of that and more in today's video. Why is talking about the ethics of sexuality so scary? Unlike many other topics previously addressed on this channel, conversations about sexuality can feel deeply personal and sometimes even traumatic. On the one hand, judging from the demographics of my viewer base, there are likely many viewers who hold traditional religious views that shape the foundation of their core identity. These viewers may strive very diligently to pursue the virtue of chastity, but they may struggle to actualize their values to varying degrees. Failing to live up to one's values can be painful, but the pain associated with sexual shortcomings can be especially astute, since many religious individuals feel compelled to keep their struggles secret. Perhaps such individuals fear being judged by their religious contemporaries, or perhaps they fear that their shortcomings may be exploited by the secular world as rhetorical ammo against the faith they hold dear. Either way, they often struggle alone, afraid that their suffering will be met with scorn and mockery if they reach out for help. Such individuals may fear that conversations about sexual ethics will attempt to dismiss as meaningless what they've been fighting so hard to achieve. On the other hand, many secular liberals resent conversations about sexual ethics because those conversations carry the residue of shame, repression, and control. Perhaps they grew up in cultural environments where sex was treated as dirty, and where questions about desire were met with silence or condemnation. For these individuals, the journey toward embracing sexual agency has been hard-fought, a process of reclaiming ownership over their bodies, their identities, and their boundaries. When discussions of sexual ethics arise, they may fear that the speaker will attempt to shame them or attack their very sense of self. When they hear calls for virtue, they may suspect it's a coded demand for conformity to unrealistic standards, rather than a sincere invitation to holistic flourishing. There's one thing I'd like to make clear from the outset. This video is not aimed at judging anyone. I recognize that my viewers will likely have a large diversity of opinions about sex, and I want to make clear that I value all of my viewers, regardless of their perspectives. This video is aimed, just like every other video in my Living the Good Life series, at exploring how virtuous habits can help us flourish and live a meaningful life. We must be willing to discuss sexuality without shame or fear, to acknowledge that sex is a fundamental part of the human experience that shouldn't be hidden away or looked upon with disgust or disdain. But we must also recognize that sexuality isn't something separate from the moral life. Ethics is a thread that weaves through every part of who we are, including how we love and how we connect. Sex should neither be ignored in ethical reflection, nor treated as the single most important ethical question one can ponder. Instead, it deserves to be understood as something deeply human, meaningful, and worth getting right. If our ethical concern is with forming constructive sexual habits instead of destructive ones, that begs the question: what makes a sexual habit constructive or destructive? What types of behaviors deserve to be characterized as lustful? Actions are lustful not because they hinge upon sexual desire. Rather, they are lustful inasmuch as they transform what is meant for connection into a mechanism of disconnection. As the writer Frederick Buechner once said, Lust is harmful to the degree that instead of drawing you close to other human beings in their humanness, it unites bodies but leaves the lives inside them hungrier and more alone than before. Likewise, John Paul II stated that the problem with lust is not that it shows too much of the person, but that it shows far too little. In other words, lust offers the illusion of closeness while quietly severing us from the full reality of the other person. C.S. Lewis once remarked that while love desires the whole of a person, lust merely wants a pleasure for which the body of another is required. Lust, in short, fragments us, isolating our bodies from our personalities, such that we treat others not as ends in themselves to be cared for holistically, but as means to the end of gratification. Why do we objectify others? According to the medieval philosopher Thomas Aquinas, when sexual desire becomes divorced from love, the type of love he calls Amor Benevolentiae, namely willing the good of the other, it reduces a person to their utility for achieving gratification, rather than recognizing them as a whole person whose dignity means they have a right to be loved authentically. The danger of lust is that it is incomplete, a shallow substitute for what sex is truly meant to be. Lust may feel powerful, even euphoric, but in its incompleteness, it leaves behind something hollow. A craving not for more pleasure, but for the connection and holistic care that was missing from the start. But it's important to remember that people don't pursue lust because they're shallow or heartless. More often than not, they're searching, perhaps desperately, for something real. Even when lust leaves us more alone than connected, the initial impulse behind it is rarely hollow. It's often a cry of a heart longing to be seen, to be touched, to feel safe and wanted. We chase after pleasure not just for the pleasure itself, but for the promise it seems to hold. The comfort of closeness, the affirmation of being desired, the illusion, however fleeting, that we matter to someone. The tragedy is not that we want too much from sex, but that we settle for too little. What we're really looking for is not just a body to hold, but a soul to meet. We want to be loved, not just wanted. Known, not just touched. But when we search for love in the wrong places, we can find ourselves complicit in our own ache. We may agree to dynamics that feel validating in the moment, but leave us emptier after. The difficult truth is this: use is still use, even when it's mutual. When two people treat each other as a means to escape loneliness or self-doubt, rather than as whole persons to be cherished, something fundamentally necessary is still being missed. The consent may be real, but the connection isn't. And deep down, we often know it. How else can sexual habits be destructive? Part of what makes sex so powerful, and at times so perilous, is that it can reflect our wounds as much as our desires. As the psychologist Richard Nicastro observes, the human psyche has an uncanny ability to sexualize emotional pain, to imbue past trauma, unmet needs, or unresolved shame with erotic energy as a way of making it feel bearable, even desirable. In this light, some sexual behaviors aren't just about seeking pleasure, but about seeking relief. Yet such relief is inherently temporary and often bypasses the healing our hearts most need. Without realizing it, we may come to treat sex as a coping mechanism, a mere reflecting back what we haven't yet resolved within ourselves. When sex becomes a kind of self-medication, a way to manage pain without confronting it, we risk distorting not only our sense of self, but also our relationship to others. This isn't to say that sexual expression is inherently harmful. On the contrary, it can be deeply healing when rooted in love and mutual respect. But when our subconscious wounds steer the wheel instead of love, sexual behavior can become compulsive, manipulative, or even damaging. People may find themselves drawn towards fantasies or practices that echo abuse, degradation, or domination. Not because they are cruel, but because they are hurting, and their minds have fused arousal with unresolved trauma. Even when no one intends harm, the disconnection between act and consequence can still lead to harm. Certain fetishistic behavior, for example, even if consensual, can enable addiction, expose others to disease, or encourage infidelity. Worse yet, those pursuing sex as a commodity may unwittingly interact with or provide financial support for systems that perpetuate abuse, feeding into demand for revenge porn, sex trafficking, or coercive subjection of sex workers. Lust has far-reaching consequences. When sex is pursued thoughtlessly, without care for what may result, it's often women who bear the greatest cost, left alone to carry the consequences when a partner walks away. When lust views others as mere opportunities for pleasure, and not as people to be loved and cared for holistically, people may find themselves abandoned at their greatest hour of need. And perhaps just as tragically, life may come to be viewed as something expendable. None of this is to say that people set out to do harm. It is rather to suggest that when desire becomes detached from dignity, even the most consensual of choices can leave behind deep and lasting wounds. How then do we build constructive sexual habits that don't leave us feeling broken or used? The answer lies in a kind of love that goes beyond surface-level desire, a love that sees and values the whole person in front of us. Think about the difference between truly looking someone in the eye, really seeing who they are, versus viewing them as just a way to satisfy a need. The philosopher Martin Buber calls this the difference between an I-thou relationship, where we meet someone as a unique human being worthy of care, and an I-it relationship, where we reduce them to a means to an end. Real love chooses to see the person behind the body, listens with empathy, and stays committed even when it's hard. Likewise, C.S. Lewis described love as more than just fleeting pleasure. It's about wanting what's truly best for the other person, even if it means sacrifice. Thomas Aquinas spoke of this as Amor Benevolentiae, a love that wills the good of another, honoring both their body and their soul. This kind of love is what heals the loneliness and brokenness inside us. It creates a space where both people feel truly seen, cared for, and valued, not used or forgotten. It is this kind of love, rooted in respect, dignity, and care, that leads us towards true fulfillment in our relationships and in ourselves. In short, within each of us is a longing that cannot be quenched by momentary pleasure or empty substitutes. To embrace love is to open the door to something sacred, a love that heals the fractures within us and invites us into a connection that transforms. Why choose love over lust? Because each of us is a person of immeasurable value who deserves the real thing, not a cheap substitute. You, viewer, deserve to know that you are valued for who you truly are, and that your well-being matters deeply to others. Choosing love over lust is not a rejection of desire, but a reclamation and affirmation of your deepest worth. It is a journey toward wholeness, where your heart and body, your desires and your dignity meet in harmony. You are a person with unique interests, dreams, and desires, and your whole being deserves to be cared for, because you matter. What do you think? Should we all strive to pursue love instead of lust? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when new videos are released. Also be sure to like this video so that YouTube recommends it to others. If you would like to support this channel for as little as $1 a month, you can also become a supporter on Patreon. Links in the description of this video. Always remember, you deserve more than shallow connections. You deserve love that sees and honors your whole self. Choosing that kind of love isn't always easy, but it's worth every step. Wherever you are in your story, keep reaching for the real connection that heals and transforms. Together, let's choose love over lust, dignity over disconnection, and wholeness over fragmentation. I look forward to growing together alongside you. Peace be with you. This has been The Philosopher.